What if I told you that there's a place where the earth is ripped apart into a gorge a mile deep, revealing a rock story 1.5 billion years in the making? You guessed it. In this episode, we're going to the Grand Canyon. Welcome to Every Rock Has a Story.
Hi, my name is Shemi, and this is the rock of the day. This rock is whitish, has flat and rough edges, and it leaves off this dust when you hit it on a rock, on a tough surface. I wonder, why does this rock have so many flat surfaces? Ethan, tell me more about this rock.
Thank you, Shemi, for introducing this rock to everybody. Hey, Shemi, you made some interesting observations. He talked about those flat edges and then the rough parts that it has too. Now, these flat edges are just planes of weakness that allow that rock to break apart. But on those rough edges, if we look up close together, I think I can see something that catches my eye. Some of that roughness are fossils. These fossils are loaded in this rock. Now, another thing that Shemi noticed was the white color, and that was kind of powdery on the side of his chair. That might remind you of another rock we've seen in an earlier episode, the chalk rock from episode 6. That's because this stuff is almost exactly the same as that chalk. I wouldn't call this rock chalk. I would call this a limestone. Limestone. Now, let's put this limestone over here on our rock spinner, and I can remind you where a limestone forms. Limestones form in the bottom of shallow seas in the ancient past that are rich with life, and all those little bits of life rain down on the seafloor to make that fossil-rich limestone. Now, I'm not going to focus so much in this episode on what this rock is, but I want to talk about where it comes from. It comes from one of the most incredible places on the entire planet. Now, I have a scientist friend, and she is an expert in this incredibly grand location. You guessed it, we're going to the Grand Canyon. Hey, Becky.
Hey, Ethan.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming out with us today. Everybody, I'm with Becky Flowers. Becky's a professor at the University of Colorado. And Becky, we brought this rock from the studio. It's a limestone. Do you recognize this rock?
Yeah, Ethan. I think this is the Kaibab Limestone.
The Kaibab Limestone. Now, what's so special about that particular limestone?
Yeah, so the Kaibab is famous for forming the rim of the Grand Canyon. And in fact, we are standing on Kaibab Limestone right here.
Wait a second. If we're standing on the Kaibab Limestone right now, that means that we're actually at the rim of the Grand Canyon. Check it out, everybody. We've come across the country to the state of Arizona to visit the Grand Canyon. And I gotta tell you, looking out here, it is grand. Now, Becky, you've studied the Grand Canyon. Kaibab Limestone, where do we find it out here?
Yeah, so we're standing on the Kaibab Limestone right here on this point.
Okay.
You can look across here and the white rock that makes up that cliff right there. That is all the Kaibab Limestone.
Wow.
And then if you look across the canyon, that white band on the horizon that makes up the rim of the canyon, that also is the Kaibab.
There's another white layer kind of below that one. That's something else, right?
Right, that's the Coconino Sandstone.
So a sandstone, what kind of conditions forms a sandstone?
So in this case, this is probably in a desert type climate.
So we had ancient marine shallow seas making our rock, and then before that we had a desert environment. Mm-hmm. So it's like each one of the layers here was deposited at a different time, and as we go deeper and deeper, it gets older and older. How big is the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, it's amazing. So across the canyon, it's about 18 miles to the Kaibab that we see on the other side.
Wow.
The canyon is about 280 miles long, and it's over about a mile deep.
A mile deep right here. And actually there's a place where we can see the Colorado River at the bottom of the canyon, right from where we're standing, a mile deep. So that Colorado River has been carving 280 miles long, a mile deep, to form this incredible Grand Canyon. The other question I have for you, Becky, is about the grand story of this canyon. How old is the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Ethan, and it depends on what you mean by that question. So the Kaibab Limestone itself, it's about 270 million years old.
So here at the top.
Here at the top, and then rocks at the bottom of the canyon are as old as about 1.7 billion years right here.
1.7 billion years at the bottom. Have you been down there?
I have, yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's just remarkable when you look out there and you see, and I hope you can see it at home, all those stripes, each one of those rock layers from the Kaibab Limestone all the way down to those 1.7 billion-year-old rocks at the bottom. Each one of those rocks and layers has its own story.
That's right. Many rocks, many different stories.
Yeah. Tell you what, why don't we go for a walk, see how deep we can get, and you can tell us about how long it took to carve this Grand Canyon. Should we do it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go for a walk. So, how did you get into geology in the first place?
Yeah, so one of my earliest memories just as a little kid was being in the entryway of the Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and being in the shadow of this enormous dinosaur skeleton, which I remember as being a T-Rex. I don't
it's
know
always
if
a
that's
T-Rex.
actually right, but just being so impressed, even at that age,
Yeah.
that the Earth has just changed dramatically through time, and that the Earth has a story, and I wanted to learn more about that story.
So now you're a professor of geoscience at the University of Colorado. You're one of the world's experts in the Grand Canyon. How often do you come to this place?
Yeah, so I've been here about 10 times.
And when you come to the Grand Canyon to do your science, what do you do?
Yeah, so we'll collect rock samples. So we'll hike down, in some cases into the bottom of the canyon.
Wow.
We'll raft the river and collect samples that we then take back to our lab to analyze.
Okay, and so it's the data that you collect in your laboratory from those particular samples that helps you reconstruct the history of the Grand Canyon.
That's right.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's go a little bit deeper and talk more. All right, Becky, I think this is as far as we're going to get on our hike today. We're not going to get to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but you have been there. You've been to the bottom.
That's right, yeah. So this is a sample of 1.7 billion-year-old granite from the bottom of the canyon.
That's awesome. Now, when we started our conversation, we asked you, how old is the Grand Canyon? Just how long did it take to carve this canyon?
Well, that is a controversial question, but I would say it's very clear from the data and the observations that most of this part of the canyon was carved in the last 6 million years. Here we're in the eastern part of the canyon, but we've collected data from the westernmost part of the canyon that provides strong evidence that that segment is as old as 70 million years.
70 million years. And you published that work, right?
Yeah.
That 10 years ago, a paper in Science came out. So different parts of the canyon were carved at different times, perhaps by different river systems.
That's right. That's exactly right.
What a story. And it's amazing to think that even something as well studied as the Grand Canyon still has mysteries that scientists like you are still uncovering. Wow.
Yeah.
Becky, thank you so much for being here on this episode of Every Rock Has a Story. We've learned so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan. I love the Grand Canyon. This has been great.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, we're back. And this time, we've got a 1.7 billion-year-old rock from the bottom of the Grand Canyon that Becky collected in one of her rafting adventures. And we've got the Kaibab Limestone from the very top of the Grand Canyon. That's 1.5 billion years of Earth history represented in the rocks of the Grand Canyon. You know, Becky's research has challenged long-held views about the age of the canyon itself. Her data collected from these rocks and others in the Grand Canyon are suggesting that parts of the Grand Canyon began to be carved as old as 70 million years ago. That's much older than we used to think. Have you ever heard people on TV say, well, scientists have found, or scientists are saying? You ever wonder who these scientists are, where they are, what they look like? Well, you just met one in this episode, Becky Flowers. Becky is one of those scientists, and she's done the work to change the way we think about this grandest of land formations. I want to thank Becky for being part of this episode, and I want to remember this whole thing started with Shemi and how he described this white chalky rock to all of us at the start. I hope I see you next time. Bye-bye. The rim of the Grand Canyon. Well, this rock, I believe, is exactly where we are. We are standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon. Hang on a second, Becky, come back. That frames up nicely with our...
The Kaibab Limestone.
It makes me think about the other people that I can hear who are walking and me forgetting my lines. But besides that, this is a good take. All right. Okay, that's good.